Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Future Leaders. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if technology is on our side, we should be live streaming on LinkedIn and also live on Zoom. So, welcome. We're just going to take a couple of minutes to allow you all to settle in, grab your cup of tea or coffee, depending on where you are in the world. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And I really hope that you are ready for a super insightful episode where we're going to be speaking all about managing and motivating others, which, as you know, as leaders, is one of the big focuses of what your role is. So don't forget to make sure you got your sound on, make sure you're listening in. We're going to jump into some introductions of our guests any moment now. And also, I'm going to be talking to you about how you can interact with us on this session because you know me, I'm all about audience participation as much as possible. So I want you to all have the opportunity to ask your questions to our esteemed panel of amazing leaders from all over the world that have joined us today. But before we do that, let me just take a couple of seconds to just go over some really basic housekeeping. So first of all, this is a 90-minute event. You heard that right. We are live for 90 minutes. So wish us luck, wish us good internet connectivity. And I'm super excited as well about the debate and discussion that we're going to be having today. If you need to drop off before the 90 minutes, it will be recorded, but please stay with us live for as long as you can because we will be addressing live questions for half of the session. So please make sure that you take the opportunity to ask your questions to our leaders, and I'll explain to you how you can do that in just a second. If you're on Zoom, if you're joining us on Zoom, welcome. Don't worry about your camera. You have joined us in listen only mode. So it doesn't matter if you've just woken up and you're in your PJs, nobody's watching you. All eyes are on our amazing panel and me right now. So the other thing I want to let you know is that we will be centralizing our communication via Slido. I'm going to show you all now how we can do that. So let me just share my screen. So let's jump in. I'm really excited to welcome Serge Tabet, who's the Director of Regulatory Affairs for EMEA at Terumo. We also have with us today Nilu Gibson, who's the Worldwide VP for Regulatory for MDS at BD, and Andrea Sparti, Head of QARA and Solutions Diabetes Care at Elemed. So we'll be going more into their introductions in just a second. Now, as I mentioned to you, Zoom and LinkedIn Live. So welcome if you're joining us on Zoom and LinkedIn Live. I'm going to show you now how we can interact with Slido. And please note that on Slido, you can upvote. So if you don't have a question and you're here just listening in, that's also okay. Have a look at the questions that other people are putting in. If something in there catches your interest, you can upvote the question to make sure that it gets answered. If you have tech issues, please go into the Zoom chat for support. As I said to you already, it will be recorded. We will not overrun. I know your time is precious, so we will be sticking to that as much as possible. And please, I'm really big on feedback. We have more sessions coming up in the future, and we'd love to hear what your thoughts were on this session, what you thought of our speakers, and also ideas for future sessions or even ideas for future speakers. So please keep an eye on your inbox for the follow-up, and please take a second to let us know how you thought the session went. So here is the magical QR code. So if you have your phone handy, just scan that QR code and it will take you directly to Slido. If you don't have your phone handy and you prefer to access Slido not via your phone and actually on your desktop, you should see in the Zoom chat any moment now a link that you can click on that will open up Slido in a separate browser window that will give you access to the questions. We won't be monitoring any questions from any other channels. So if you are listening on LinkedIn, we are not watching the chat on LinkedIn. So if you want to interact with us, if you want to get your questions answered, make sure you're answering and asking your questions via Slido. So let's actually give it a try. If you're looking at your Slido right now, you should see a poll popping up asking, where are you joining from? So I'm interested to see where you guys are all joining us from. So please take a second to message in the Slido and let us know where in the world you are. So somebody's from Germany. We can see Sheffield in the UK. France, we've got UK. So a lot of Europe at the moment. Where else do we have people joining from? Okay, Hamburg, Denmark. We've got Switzerland. Hello to Lausanne. Hello to Ohio, USA. Hello to Hamburg. Brilliant. So we really do have a global audience. So welcome everybody, and super excited to have you here. So let's get started without further ado. I think that's enough of preamble from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let's jump into some introductions from our amazing panelists. Nilu, I'm going to start with you. Maybe you can tell us who you are and a little bit more about what you do.
Thank you. So I'm Nilu Gibson. I'm the Worldwide Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for Becton Dickinson and Company. I've been with this organization for 4 years. I have the privilege of leading about 80 people in the org across the world pretty much. So we've got people in the US, Australia, India, UK, Switzerland. I think, yeah, that's pretty much covering that gamut there. Prior to BD, I spent over 20 plus years with Johnson & Johnson supporting 7 different businesses with a wide variety of a portfolio. And that was really fun as well.
Thank you so much, Nilu, and some really well-known company names there on your resume. So super excited to hear all the perspective that you're going to add. Serge, let's go over to you.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So my name is Serge Tabé. I'm currently the Regulatory Affairs Director at Terumo BCT. I have a team of 9 people that are taking care of the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region. So from Russia, Gulf region, the entire Africa, and obviously Europe. I have people located currently in Russia, in Ireland, in Belgium, in France, in Spain, so kind of spread across Europe. I've been with my company for the last couple of years, and before that, I spent 10 years at Zimmer Biomet doing quality and regulatory, and at the time, I had a team that was up to 65 people.
Thanks so much, Serge. And over to you, Andrea.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea. I'm the head of RAQA and solution at Ypsomed Diabetes Care based in Switzerland. I've been with the company for the past 4 years, moved into different positions within the company and landed in the position I'm now last November. So I'm still kind of learning the ropes here. I'm leading a group of approximately 50 people. They are all based in Switzerland, with the exception of a couple of people that are based in Spain. What is for me new is that I'm not only leading a group of people that are in regulatory and quality, but I'm also responsible for functions that I know more superficially, like usability, like risk management, like system engineering, project management. So a brighter group of people that let's say at core, I'm regulatory. This is what I've been doing all my life. So for me, that's kind of a step into something different, leading these functions that I know less.
Super excited to hear about your learnings as well in leading these different functions. So guys, today the theme of the episode is all about managing and motivating others. And some of the key points that we really want to touch on are, dipping into effective communication. How do you inspire trust in people within your teams? How do you engage people? How do you motivate people? And also, and this is the one that nobody wants to talk about, how do you have difficult conversations? Because that's also part of it, right? So let's dive in. I have also prepared some questions myself that I'd love to put to you. I'm gonna shout your name and ask you to address the question, but please don't forget to raise your hand. You can do it virtually or just like that if you've got something to add. But first of all, I'd love to know from all of you actually, what is the one thing that, in your opinion, makes a leader great at managing and motivating others? I'll start with you, Serge.
I guess for me, empathy would be the key aspect to be able to lead people. And empathy, not only for the people that you lead, but also to the organization, to the state of where the organization is at, what are the goals, what are the needs of the organization, and also obviously empathy for the people that are in the organization and not only in your team. So to be able to lead, you have to feel like what's needed from those people, what are they looking for at work, because not everyone is looking for the same thing, and to make sure that you are able to match that with company goals.
Empathy is a really interesting one, but how would you define it, the difference between like empathy and sympathy, which sometimes comes up?
Empathy is like understanding and understanding the feelings or the position from someone else. Sympathy is positive as, I mean, a positive sensation or a positive feeling, but empathy is truly making the effort of understanding the position of others. And that makes the true difference, because if you want to be able to lead people, it means also being able to connect with them. And to be able to connect with them, actually, you have to understand like how they feel and what are the needs.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Serge. Neelu, what do you think? One thing.
I think it's along the same vein. I think being genuinely invested and interested in the growth of your associates goes a long way. And that then talks to us, and this is a theme that you're going to hear from me, is like we're people first, associates second. So just kind of having that understanding of what makes people tick, what is their aspiration, and how can we marry those with the goals and objectives of an organization. So I think just being genuinely invested in the growth and development of your team.
Yeah, I really like that idea of people first, associates second, because that's such a true point, isn't it? We're all humans, and being a leader is really addressing that and bringing that to the forefront. Thank you. And Andrea, what about you?
So yeah, I like the answer from Serge. Empathy, I like that. When I saw the question, I thought, so what did I like in my bosses, past bosses, or my current boss? You know, what do I like in there? And I think for me, one thing that has not been mentioned is delegation. So allowing people to, you know, to be in control of what they do to the extent that is possible to them. And I think, at least for me, this is where I've grown the most, when I've been able to, you know, to be in charge of my own decisions as far as possible. And I thought delegation for me is an important point.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to break for a second to share the QR code one more time with everybody who has recently joined us. So to everybody listening, please take a second to scan this QR code, because once it's off the screen, it's really hard to get back up. But please scan this QR code. You're going to see there already some pre-registered questions that some of you have put in at the point of registering. So take a second to look through those questions and give a thumbs up, upvote the ones that you really want to have answered in the second part of the episode today. But also, if you have your own questions that you want to add at any point during the discussion today, please add them to the Slido, and we are going to address as many as we can in a quick fire round in the second section of this episode. So for those of you on Zoom, you'll also have the URL link on chat that you can access and open up in a browser window. But if not, grab your phone, scan this QR code and open up your Slido so you can join and interact with us throughout the session today. Cool. Okay, so let's jump in and talk a little bit more then about building trust, because this is something that obviously is super important when it comes to managing and motivating others. So my question is, how do you build and maintain trust within your team? I'd love to know your tricks and tips and tactics of how you do that. Serge?
So I guess from my side, when I read that question, like two things came to my mind at first. The first thing is lead by example. If you want to build trust from from the person that you're in charge of, or from your peers, or from whoever, basically, obviously you cannot ask to others what you cannot apply to yourself. And that goes to every aspect. So it means like how you communicate, what are your priorities, and you have to apply that to yourself as well. So I guess that's the first thing. And the second thing that came to my mind is actually, that's a very personal way of doing things, but I like to give trust upfront to people, especially in my team. So I don't think that it's something that they have to earn, but they have to work to keep it, to maintain it. Because what I realize is like some people like to gain trust, or to have people gain their trust, and you spend that time like evaluating and try to understand and so on. And ultimately, if it works well, you have trust in people. But on the other way around, if you give trust upfront and you say, okay, I trust you, and now you just have to keep that trust and continue to build on it, usually you get to the same result. So either you have the trust or you don't have it much faster, and you did not spend the time trying to assess that. So those are the two things that came to my mind when I say build and maintain trust. The other thing is also to assume good intention from the people. So it's very easy in the current world that we have all different priorities, we have all different type of motivation, we have also sometimes personal issues. The other thing is also to when you want to have the trust of the people, it's a both-way street, that you have also to work and making sure that you take things in the right way and you don't assume bad intention from people.
Mm, mm. Really interesting. Interesting that you give trust up front, and you give it willingly, because there's a different school of thought. You know, other people might say, I don't give a lot of trust, you have to earn it over time with me. So it's interesting. And Nilu, I can see you nodding and shaking your head. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that completely, because I mean, and I say this every time I join a new organization or a new team. It's like, I start from a position of trust. I trust you to be to be a subject matter expert. I trust you to be the best person that you can be for the team and to support, right? But I also recognize that I need to earn your trust. And that is, again, a very individual thing. There are people who will immediately go, oh, great, I've got a new leader, I fully trust them and I'm going to move forward. But then you also have others who are like, oh, I don't know you, I'm going to take a little bit of time. So I think as a leader, I always start from that position of saying, you know what, I trust you to do the best that you can, and I will continue to work to gain and maintain your trust.
Really interesting. And Andrea, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the lead by example is also the first thing that came to my mind. I think that's very important, is to, walk the talk, basically. I also thought about not only the relationship between myself and the individual team members, but, you want to develop trust within the team. And I think, for me at least, it's important to have probably kind of clear rules and consistencies in those rules, so that everybody plays according to the same rules and they know what they are. Give some confidence and openness, allow people to express what they are feeling comfortable with and what they are not feeling comfortable with. I think that's also important, that you don't have to play a part, but you can say, oh, this thing is not something I haven't done yet. I need to learn it. Who can help me there? And I think when this openness is possible, then trust is there. Otherwise, you kind of force people to play a part and play a role that they just because they don't feel comfortable in saying this, I don't know. And yeah, for me, that's also something important into having this openness and this confidence in the people.
So you all kind of hit on the point of leading by example, and I just want to delve into that a little bit more, because sometimes you can't necessarily lead by example in like doing the job that somebody else is doing, right? Because perhaps you've hired somebody as a subject matter expert and you're the leader, so your roles are actually completely different. So in what way do you actually go about leading by example when your function, like your role, is actually different to those of the people within your team? Serge?
So maybe on this one thing that I like and what I like to think about, and it's something that is usually well known within quality, is say what you do what you say, and prove it. And it means that if you're committed to deliver something on time, you do it, and that applies to anyone. So it's also respecting, and I like to enforce respect among team members, because I think it goes along with building trust. It means that you show up on times to meeting, and those are very simple examples, but I guess it's it's not a comparison between being a subject matter expert and a leader. On the behavior side, on how you deliver results and what type of results you deliver, you can always lead by example. I mean, even if you're a leader and sometimes your work is not as, let's say, factual or easy to spot as someone who is like truly producing documents, for instance, you have always abilities to deliver concrete example on what you want the team to apply. And I think for me, it's truly of saying what you want to do and doing what you're saying and having evidence of that.
It's doing the basics, isn't it? So, actually, with these types of things, and that's how, to Nilu's point, that's how also you earn trust as well as a leader with your team, following through with what you say you're going to do. And Andrea, just you mentioned setting some ground rules to foster that feeling as well within the team. I'm curious to know, what are the ground rules that you set in terms of behaviors and expectations?
Yeah, I would say for me, these are the rules that kind of set the team culture. You know, in the end, I think what you want is to develop a team culture that people recognize themselves in open communication, in honesty, in, you know, these kind of things. And exactly the examples that Serge was giving. You know, you commit to this, then you keep it. You will show up on time. If I have a meeting with you, I don't give priority to something else. I give priority to you in the end. And I think those are the kind of rules that I expect from the people, and I try to give it back in the same way.
Really interesting. I want to go to the subject of like transparency, because we kind of came to that, right? Of, you know, you foster that trust, and then you hope that there's open communication. And so you do that by also having open communication with your team. But as leaders of a business, often you might find yourselves in situations where you know something that is not appropriate to share with your team because you have business confidentiality that you need to maintain. But equally, you know, my question is, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate the balance of keeping an open and transparent communication culture to foster trust with people within your team, but then at the same time, sometimes there's things that you can't communicate? Nilu, I'm interested to know your thoughts on that.
I think that this one is a difficult question because there is that line. I think there are two aspects that play into it for me. One is sort of like organizational maturity, because I can tell you there was one team that I worked with, any kind of announcement that came out, even if it was for a completely different function, I used to have my team kind of come into the office and go, well, what does this mean for us? And did we know? And so we have to sort of help our team members understand that there are aspects that we have some control over and others that we don't. And change is a constant. So we can either spend our time worrying about what is happening and continues to happen, or we can continue to be productive and focus on what we need to get done. So that's one aspect as far as, you know, the things that are external. But internal to our own organizations, as you said, I mean, there are things that we as leaders are not able to share. I mean, these are business confidentiality. There are, you know, ethics issues. There are, you know, legal reasons where we may not be able to share. But one of the effective ways of managing that is to being honest with my team, to say, you know what, there are things that I will not be able to communicate to you, obviously for these, you know, these reasons, but whatever I can, I will. And also recognize that the leaders within our team are actually working towards the best interest of our team as well as the organization. So sort of having that trust that we are doing what we can for the good of the overall organization, our teams, and the individual. And this is an ongoing dialogue. This isn't a one and done as to trust me and move forward. It is, you know, leaving the door open to having people come and ask questions. Because again, you have different folk who are more than comfortable with whatever decisions that come up, but then there are others who are a little bit more insecure or whatever. They may have questions. So being leaders that are open to having those questions and answering them to the best of our abilities.
It springs to mind as well when it comes to things like reorganizations and
yes,
which have been unfortunately a bit of a theme recently with in MedTech generally, right? And so obviously sometimes there's conversations that you're privy to that you might know something's coming for somebody in your team, And how do you handle a situation if they come up to you and say, hey, how is this gonna affect me? And you know that it will, but you can't tell them yet.
I think it's again that walking that fine line is, so, you know, we are doing what we need to do for the business, and we will communicate when I am able to communicate this. But in the meantime, have the faith that, you know, we're going to do the best that we can. And again, you cannot absolutely, you know, take somebody aside and go, hey, by the way, because again, it's the rules of business too that we need to navigate. So I'd love to hear Andrea and Serge's perspectives on that one.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Honestly, from my perspective, I think there is normally good understanding that you're not able to share some business confidential things, even things that are going to impact people. I think at least the people in my organization, they are probably mature enough to understand that there are reasons why things cannot be communicated earlier, and they are not. And I think obviously everybody would like to be into that inner circle, but they also understand that's not always possible. Where I have more difficulties is in discussions that are not actually business related, but more people related. There, I think there is less understanding on what you should or should not communicate. And for me, that's more a line that is more difficult to walk, because I don't think it's appropriate to discuss other people's performance with, you know, with one employee on but that is something that comes on the table quite often in this, you know, being honest and transparent, and that's a limit where I find it more difficult to have understanding on the other side that I cannot communicate on these things in the end.
Serge, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it also comes to the role of the leaders and of the manager to kind of protect their team, because sometimes you're aware of things that may or may not happen, and you can be in a company where decision can be made and changed, and so sometimes not sharing things is also a way to avoid pollution to your team members. And you have also to explain that to the folks, because you receive a lot of information and you have to filter them through to what's important and relevant for your team to be able to operate in a normal, I would say, or in a comfortable environment. And it's also the role of the management to know obviously what they can and cannot share, but that's based on what Nilu mentioned, of confidentiality that can be due to legal, to ethical, to many different reasons. But it's also the role to know when there are information that you don't need to share, because it's just going to create stress that may be completely unnecessary. And I've been through that like numerous times, where we had information, we had like a strategy, and over the next month completely changed, and what was supposed to have an impact was completely removed or cancelled. The problem with too much, it's the difference between transparency and clarity. It's like, truly, if you're transparent and you give the full pictures of everything all the time, you just overwhelm people, and then they cannot focus on what they're supposed to be doing. So it's, as Andrea and Nilu mentioned, it's a question of balance. And that's also the role of the leaders to know what and when they can share something.
I really like the idea of like giving clarity as well, because that's actually key to motivating the team as well. And sometimes having too much information can be confusing, and lead to procrastination and all other kind of impacts. So fully support what you've just shared. I want to go to motivating the team, because actually something that Nilu mentioned earlier on was about, you know, people first, associates second, try to understand people's goals and directions. So I'd love to get more into the tacticals of like, actually, how do you go about motivating your team, and also how do you tailor the way you go about motivating, because obviously people are motivated by different things. So Nilu, I'm gonna throw that one back to you.
So I don't believe in sort of the one motivation technique fits all, methodology. And again, as you mentioned, we're all individuals. So I approach motivation from a place of treating each associate with respect and taking an active interest, again, in what matters to them. because, and this is one which is funny, because I always say, you know, money isn't my primary motivator, and my husband keeps saying, stop saying that. but it isn't, right? So in my own career journey, I do know it is very demotivating when you don't trust your line manager, or you're not sure what they're going to be advocating on your behalf. But on the flip side, I also know how empowering it is when a manager says things like, you know what, I trust your judgment, or what's your recommendation, and then execute against that. So again, I think it's a balance between knowing the capabilities and capacity of each of your individual contributors or individual associates, and then effectively, you know, navigating those and turning those into strengths.
Mm-hmm. Serge, how do you go about motivating people within your team?
So I'm going to say like something similar to what Nilu mentioned. Motivating the team comes originally from motivating each individual. And that means that you understand what is their appetite for, like what are they looking for in their job, what are they looking for in their professional career. So it means spending time with them, and it kind of relates with empathy that I was mentioning earlier. Then the motivation also comes from having clear expectation and understanding what also are the pain points that they would like to, where they would like to grow, where they would like to progress, what are the challenges that they would like to overcome. Because most of the time you realize that like people know their job, and that's why usually you have hired them. So the question is, how do you help them achieve their targets? And that's truly like motivation comes from achievement also. When you see things moving, it's always easier and brings more motivation. So the question for me is like, how can I help my team to achieve what they're supposed to be achieving? And I'm there to advocate for them, to give them advices, to define strategy with them, not to do their job, obviously, but to provide them support, resources. That's my job. I'm here to help them do their job. And usually that drives motivation because it drives results.
I think it's really interesting the point that Nilu mentioned as well of like, money's not my only motivator. Or, no, sorry, one primary motivator, I think is what you said, right? And I'm interested to actually understand though, how do you identify what are the motivators of the people within your team? Like, what does that actually look like? Are you using tools? Are you sitting them down and saying, tell me what motivates you? And how are you actually finding out what is because sometimes there's like a surface level motivation, and actually in reality the real thing that motivates them is something a bit deeper that might not come in their first answer. So how are you actually going about it to find that out? Nilu, maybe.
Sure. I think this goes, the one aspect we haven't actually talked about yet really is development plans.
Yeah.
And having those discussions, because I think to your point, you know, saying that, hey, I want to be promoted. Okay, why, right? It's kind of asking that why. I remember an associate many years ago, you know, had a one-on-one, and she kept talking about wanting to be a people manager. So, you know, just because that's the next logical step in her career journey. So I kept asking her, like probing as to why do you want to be a people manager versus an individual contributor? And her responses were all about her. At no point did she say, I want to be a people manager because I'm genuinely interested in developing people, or, you know, having that sort of an interest. So I gave her that feedback, and I said, you know, it's one thing to look at something from a, what is it in it for me? But if you truly want to be an effective leader, you need to look at what is in it for others. So having those kinds of, you know, probing questions really do help you get to what that motivating aspect is. But again, you have to take the time, and you need to set up separate time for a development type of discussion rather than a regular update, because that kind of conversation needs its own space and time.
Yeah. And I have a question, and it was actually a question that somebody pre-registered, but I thought it was a really interesting one. What do you do in a situation where you've identified somebody's motivator, right? So for example, they want to get promoted because they want to take that next step in their career. But in reality, promotion is not possible. How do you keep somebody motivated when the thing that motivates them is not something that you can deliver right now? Serge.
That's a tricky one, but I guess we've all lived that experience before. It's obviously, I mean, it's something to, first, it's to acknowledge that's what's the motivation of the person. So it's try not to deflect that, to hide that, or to bypass that in any ways. Is to make sure that you make clear that you understand that this is the way that the person wants to evolve. Then the options, if there is no possibility to be promoted at the time, first, before getting to that, I'm just going to take a step backward. Promotion, we have to understand, and Nilu's example is a very good one. Promotion is always understood by people as taking management position, which personally I think is a mistake, because not everyone is made to manage people. And sometimes going for being an expert in something is a way better way to promote people and to have them expand, because like leading people is truly something different than being a single contributor. But then if truly the person is willing to evolve, and that applies basically to being a subject matter expert or a leader in the company, the question is, in the meantime, what is needed for that person to grow and be suitable for their next experience? So what type of project you can give them in their current role, but maybe that goes slightly beyond the scope that they usually have, where you can help them, mentor them, for them to start growing and being able to achieve their next step in their career. So it's always like seeing the opportunities that are existing internally, and there are always projects where you can have that person do something outside of their comfort zone, because promotion and usually the next step is getting you outside of your comfort zone. So you can start ahead of time and do that with what you have currently. And then it's a question of how long the people, for how long, like putting that in time. It's also a concrete discussion. I mean, you don't have 2,000 VP in a company. So if everyone wants to become a VP, at some point you have an issue, and people have to acknowledge that this is how the business is working. So helping people to grow in their current position and be ready for the next is the key factor. Then the question is for how long you are willing to do that and your company is able to do that. It also means that, at least from my side, at some point, if there is no opportunity within the company, it may be also an external opportunity that will bring what the person is looking for. And that's just the reality.
And what are your thoughts? I just want to take that one step further. What are your thoughts on actively pushing someone who you've developed that you think is great, but you know there's no opportunity for them in your company? I'm interested to hear from all of you. What are your thoughts on actively then supporting that person to find something outside of the organization? Andrea?
I think this is part of our toolkit, right? I think the promotion is, as Serge and Nilu said, this promotion is not something you decide from one day to the next. So it is part of long-term discussion. It is part of the development discussions that you have, a development plan. And indeed, for me, it's clear that for some people, there will be opportunities in the company. For other people, probably not. And at some point, they will need to take that jump and go somewhere else. And I think in particular in regulatory and quality, it's almost a requirement. You cannot make all of your career inside the same company. So I think you have to. You are looking for hiring good people, but then that means also that you have to let go some of your good people because they have a better opportunity somewhere else. I think it's part, as Serge said, it's part of life. And I think we have to, if we don't play that game, then we will never be able to hire good people in the end, right? So.
Neely, what are your thoughts?
I agree with that. I think also having like a robust succession plan and discussing that with your team members as well. And it's not just my philosophy is I would love to keep my fantastic talent within my business unit. However, if I recognize that there isn't space for that growth, it's not just about promotions. It's about growth from a subject matter expertise, as you said, Andrea. It's like, if you have class 2 medical device experience, you may want to get class 3. I may not be able to offer that within my business. The second tier for me is where else within BD can I find them a home? Because if there are awesome, talented people that we want to retain within the business, it should be your own business. But then, are there other opportunities within my sister companies? And then, of course, we've all networked over the years effectively. And so if you know that if either of those two are not going to be a good fit or not working, then try and place them somewhere where you know that they will be successful and grow to their fullest potential.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things as a leader, right? Is like you spend all this time nurturing talent, growing this talent, and then it gets to the point where actually sometimes the best thing for that person is moving to a different business unit, or for them to obtain that next step is to kind of sometimes let them go, so that's really interesting to hear your perspective on that. So guys, everybody listening in, I'm going to just jump to the QR code one more time, because then in approximately 5 minutes we're going to go into the live Q&A sessions. So if you're not already on Slido, scan this QR code, add your questions to the Slido, or have a scan of the questions that are already there and upvote, give a thumbs up to the ones that you really, really want to have answered. And we are going to try and get through as many of them as possible in the remaining time with our amazing panel. So I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I definitely am, and I'm also learning a lot. But I want to just touch on the topic of difficult conversations, because this is one that is part of leadership, and it's part of managing and motivating people, but it's actually the one that sometimes people tend to avoid. So I'm interested to understand, actually, from all of you really, how do you handle difficult conversations, and what do you actually say? How do you broach the subject of somebody not performing to expectations or underperforming? How do you actually have those conversations with members within your team? Serge, I'm going to start with you to give Nilu and Andrea some time to think.
So that's the hot potatoes. And I had time to think about it. So I think first it's a question of the mindset of the leader who's going to engage in that difficult conversation. And it's also acknowledging that there is sometimes no way to avoid that. And it's part of the job. You're paid for that. It's what you owe the company, is to have those difficult conversations. So if you don't want to have those one, you may want to avoid leadership position, because there is almost no chance that you can experience a career without difficult conversation. Then it comes to first having trust, at least a minimal level of trust with the person, because otherwise it's difficult to having a like nice feedback is always easy. Having bad feedback, it's a difficult conversation, because everyone is uncomfortable with that. Like the person that received the feedback is uncomfortable, the person giving the feedback is uncomfortable. And it's also something to recognize through the conversation, because it just makes people feel better, not good, but better around the situation, to acknowledge that. Then, I mean, I had experience in my past where I had a manager that was not performing and the team was kind of underperforming vastly due to the manager. And the question is, how do you approach that? And the first question that how I like to start the conversation is to ask the person their assessment about the situation, because for me, it's like critical to understand if first you see the situation the same way. And sometimes you get some very unexpected answers. Sometimes they just think that everything is fine. So then you're going to have to have a concrete example of what you define as fine and not fine. And sometimes they're just going to tell you, like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do it. And that sets a completely different tone to the conversation. So actually, how I like to start those difficult conversations is by asking questions to understand the state of mind of the person who I have the difficult conversation with. And if we can agree on facts, like, are we aligned that we see the same picture? Again, here, sometimes you have some very unexpected surprises that you're gonna have to think through. And then the question is, okay, what are the next steps? And difficult conversation doesn't mean that you have 1 hour in your calendar and it's finished afterwards. Sometimes both sides needs time to think and to get back later on. So it's an iterative process on both sides. And it's something sometimes difficult to we want to get rid of that. Like, you want to rip off the band-aid and say, okay, I had a difficult conversation, then we can move on. Usually life doesn't work this way. And especially if you want to bring people back into performance, it means that you have to change their state of mind, and that takes time. So recognition of the situation and recognition of the next steps, for me, all the critical items. Agree with the person that this is the path that you want to take, because if there is no agreement, it's kind of very difficult to change the situation.
So I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that this is actually an iterative process, and it's not like, hey, I've got an hour for a difficult conversation in my diary and then it's like one and done, but it's actually an ongoing conversation. Nilu, what are your tips on actually how do you handle difficult conversations?
Difficult conversations are difficult. So I don't think there's anybody, I don't think I've ever met a single manager who's like, oh, great, I look forward to those, right? So it is uncomfortable. It is something that you really have to prepare for. So the way I think about it is, taking it from oh my gosh, it's a difficult conversation, to saying, okay, what are our business needs? How can I help this person be successful? So there are either situational things that you need to talk to them about, or a behavior, or something that's over time. So having sort of almost like a talk track really helps me, from being factual, providing examples, giving that person the opportunity. It's not necessarily rebut, but to ask questions, I think goes a long way towards that. And again, as Sir said, there are times where you will have somebody who's very open and receptive to the feedback and go, oh, well, I was unaware of that, and have that sort of a factual, sort of non-emotional conversation. But more often than one would like, you do get sort of an emotional reaction. And so you have to sort of address it in a way that tries to take the emotion out of it and allows that person the time to sort of process it. Because I mean, there are people who immediately tend to react and go, well, I don't think that's true. It's like, okay, well, let me explain why, and then take the time and let's follow up and have that continued discussion. So again, I think it also talks to the maturity level and I guess the emotional state of the person you're having a discussion with. So we can be as prepared as we want to be, but the person we're having the conversation with, we should also know our teams well enough to kind of gauge what the expected outcome is going to be of that discussion.
And Andrea, I'm interested in your thoughts on this as well. So obviously, so from Nilu's perspective, it's about preparing, going to that conversation, knowing what you're going to say, having some examples ready, keeping it quite factual and fact-based. From your perspective, Andrea, how much of a heads up do you give to the individual that this is coming? So do you let them know about this and what you're going to be discussing in the conversation, or is it more of we're going to be having a conversation and then you just jump into it without really giving them much of a heads up about what it's going to be?
Good question. So yeah, I think I'm with the majority. I don't like difficult conversations in general. I don't sleep well the day before, and I tend not to announce too early. So I prefer to set up an exchange meeting or one-on-one, and then they're coming out with what it is. I don't think it's helpful for the person to not have enough information before, but knowing that this is going to be a discussion on performance without sufficient information, just so that you just stress without being able to do anything with that. I think it's never easy, but I think in a way it's also, we're trying to find a solution, not only for the company, it's also for the person. And I think if there is negative feedback, information that we have about performance that is not positive, it's something that in a way we owe to this employee. He needs to know. He needs to know, otherwise he's not able to do anything about that.
Yeah.
So I think that part is important. And I also like the fact that someone mentioned that you have to, in the end, listen and understand what is their side of the story. because in my experience, you can have someone that is underperforming, and the only reason why they're underperforming is because they are in a position that is not appropriate, maybe too stretched. Maybe you can put them within your team with a different responsibility that is more within their reach, and then they can manage, and then they are happy, and then they perform, and then this is solved. So it can be a happy ending as well. And I think that's also important.
Yeah, really, that's a really valid point as well. And actually, I'd be surprised if any of you have examples where you've gone into difficult conversations where the person is completely, totally, and utterly oblivious. It happens, but generally, what I've seen is that sometimes, as you said, probably somebody knows that they're not performing, right? Like to some extent, and there is that unhappiness there or that disengagement, and it's about having that conversation, giving the feedback, and actually trying to move forwards. And actually, forwards might be, okay, how can we help you and support you to achieve what you need to in this role? But equally, moving forwards might be, hey, is this actually the right role that's playing to all your strengths? So that's a really interesting and valid point. So thank you, everybody. How are we all doing so far? Hopefully you're not feeling the pressure too much. You all doing okay?
Right.
I'll give you a moment to have a sip of water whilst I speak to our lovely listeners. And I know that we've got over 100 people on LinkedIn listening live. I think the last time we checked, we were at 150, and we've also got people listening live in the Zoom chat. So we really hope you're enjoying the conversation and you're getting loads and loads of value. But now is the time where we're going to be going into the live Q&A, which is all about addressing your questions linked to managing and motivating others. So this is the time to get some one-on-one coaching and mentoring live from some of these amazing speakers that we have here. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. I'm going to give you the link in the chat as well. That's going to come any second now. Make sure you've scanned this QR code and that you're able to open up the Slido so you can see some of the fantastic questions that people have already put in there. Upvote the questions you really like the look of, and add your own questions that you want to put to our panelists, because we're going to be going into those questions and addressing as many of them as we can in order of popularity. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. So our panelists as well, just so you know, we're going to be dropping the questions in chat so you can read them as I read them out as well. Jess is in the background and I know she's ready to drop that in chat. So here we go. The first question we have: sometimes you come across employees that have extreme views and have difficulty fitting in a team. How do you manage them in terms of making them productive? Who wants to take that?
I can take it. So I think it depends on what these extreme views are, right? Are they personal views that are extreme, or are they like, work related? Because if they're personal views, you have a conversation, again, it could be difficult or otherwise, essentially saying, you know what, we are a community that comes into the workplace to accomplish certain things that the business needs, and our personal views and perspectives need to stay exactly that, which is personal and private. The other aspect of it is, something that's business related. Somebody could be very antagonistic during meetings, or they have very firm views on something. I think from that standpoint, you have a different conversation with them, which talks to what the, again, business expectations are, what their roles and responsibilities are supposed to be, and then navigating them through that. But I think you also have to keep an eye on it moving forward, because you don't want that turning into a performance issue in one way or another. So just a couple of thoughts from me on that.
Thank you, Nilu. Serge, Andrea, did you have anything to add to that?
Maybe.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think I think in particularly in regulatory, you may have this kind of police attitude that you may find in particular with the old style regulatory. That is something that is at least it would not fit in my team, because that's not how I think it should be. So for me, this is something that, right, you need to discuss it, you need to talk, and you need to come to an agreement. And if there is no possibility to come to an agreement and there is constant disagreement, at some point we need to agree that we part. I think it's, you know, for me, there are some kind of common and basic, you know, I don't know how to call them, approaches to the business and to how we do our work and how we approach regulatory, for example. And if there is total disagreement on the attitude, I think at some point, yeah, I cannot just work together with these people. So this has to be a conversation, and yeah, it can be a good progression and evolution into something different, or it can be, okay, well, then maybe we do business separately.
Serge, what were you going to add to that?
I think it also relates to extreme views, how the person is sharing those views, communicating those views. That's always opportunities for feedback, because there are ways that you can express different perspective, and ultimately it's good. We should value different perspective, because having always consensus in a team is not bringing new ways of doing things, new idea of thinking outside of the box. So I guess for me, when you have extreme views, is first to make sure that they are communicated the right way. So that's up to the leaders to make sure that the rules in the teams are clear. Listen to them, because sometimes out of an extreme view or a bad idea, you can come with a good idea. And also at the end, if there is no consensus amongst people, and most of the time I have to say that usually when you have discussions that are made peacefully with the right way, you come to a consensus. But if there is not, and there is a decision to be made, it's up to the management to make that decision, and you should not avoid to make that decision, because ultimately this is what's expected from you and by the company and by also the people that you're managing. Even the people with extreme views, they want a decision to be made usually.
Yeah, I think that the point on like how the communication of these extreme views is a really also valid one. I'm going to throw a curveball follow-up questions to all of you, because I'm interested in your perspectives. Because yeah, obviously extreme views, sometimes it's good to have you know, conflicting views around the table, because you get that richness of ideas and perspectives. But to Andrea's point, if it's really clashing with the rest of the team and that person's not fitting in culturally with the way that the company is operating or the way the team operates, then it's really not a good fit. Then perhaps there's a conversation about, you know, like, is this the right place for you? But what would you guys do in a situation where the person with the extreme views that may be causing conflicts in the team is your rock star best performer? Then what do you do? Does anything
you have that discussion? It's again, going back to the feedback conversation, it goes back to the thing is, feedback is only as good as it is received and acted upon, right? So you could be a superstar in an organization. You could be really great at 90% of what you do, but if that 10%, particularly when it's like communication, interacting, collaboration with teams, that can be a huge derailer. So you provide that feedback, and you not just say, hey, you didn't handle that meeting well. It's giving them, again, specific examples as to why that wasn't handled well. If it's something consistent that happens, providing them that feedback to say, look, several of your key stakeholders feel this. And here are some tools on how to address that. Another tool that I've used before is to do a 360 feedback. And so you do that independently, have that person hear the feedback from their, you know, key stakeholders, as well as get those, you know, very specific things that they need to change about their approach. And again, you have to keep track of these things as a manager to see if they are truly making that as a new way to behave. And if that's not consistent, then it's a different type of conversation that needs to happen. But I also am a proponent of, you know, behaving a different way or changing a certain aspect of yourself. Sometimes it's like holding your breath. You can only do it for so long, and then you default, right? So they may do really, really well unless they're under pressure of some kind, in which case they will default. So it's just kind of like continuing to help them recognize that, you know what, yep, you were doing great. This again happened. So now what can you do to manage that aspect of it? So a rock star, if they truly are that, then they will do that, adopt your recommendations and pivot as needed.
Mm-hmm.
For me, just to add something on that, I think for me, it's also on the culture that you define, and what's your definition of a rock star. And for me, a rock star is someone who manages the what and the how. If you just have the what, like deliveries, okay, you're going to be a single contributor, but working in companies, usually you have to work with others. So how you achieve that is, for me, equally important as what you achieved. And it's also making sure that that message is understood. So you can be as much of a rock star as if it's you're the only one in the company. If it's your own company and you want to do it this way, it's fine. But like usually you have to work with others, and how you achieve results is equally important as the result that you got.
Really interesting perspective. Andrea, how would you handle that if that person was your rock star performer?
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is compatible, to do not fit in the team, have extreme views, and be the rock star at the same time. I'm wondering, maybe for some particular issues, yes. Maybe it's also a question of finding the right role for this person. People are more or less introvert. They like to interact in a team more or less or not. So there is also part of that. But I think fundamentally I agree with Serge. In the end, you need to have both aspects. You need to be able to work with the rest of the company and not only achieve targets. Yeah.
So we're going to move on to the next question, which is, what are the most valuable lessons you have learned about leadership while managing and motivating others? Let's start with Serge.
I guess the most valuable lesson that I've learned is the concept of shadow of the leader. So how much your behavior and your mindset grows exponentially through your teams. That's something that I've underestimated until I saw it and I experienced it. And how much, I'm not going to say pressure, but how much attention you should pay to that. Because if you're like in a good mindset, people are going to be likely in a good or very good mindset. If you see everything the wrong way, people are going to start to see everything the wrong way. And that culture, that way of doing things, it's like something that you have to be constantly aware, because people in the team consciously or unconsciously interpret what you're saying or try to see behind what you're saying. So it's something where you have to be aware that this has an impact on people. So the impact that you have on people is real, and it should not be neglected or put aside. It's a huge contributor of their performance and how they approach problems and how they provide solutions.
I've never heard of the concept of shadow of a leader, but I really like the image that it portrays, and it links to kind of like the far-reaching impact that you have as a leader on the motivation as well of your teams. Neely, what about you?
I think for me, it's a couple of different elements. So one that is really important from a lessons learned standpoint is to model the behavior that you want to see in others. It's one thing to say, you guys need to collaborate, and then you just got to go off and never do it, right? So I think modeling that behavior, whatever it may be, is really important. Another aspect is that whole, like earning and maintaining trust, because that leads to the third thing for me, which is the importance of communication. Because once you earn, people's trust and you maintain it, you then are able to have open and transparent discussions. And as leaders, sometimes, we're like, okay, we talk to our direct reports and then, they manage the rest of the organization. I'm a real firm believer in not just doing skip level meetings, but also connecting with as many members of my team as I can. Because again, it goes back to that people first aspect. Because the more you do that, the more comfortable our associates feel in the ability to reach out. And they don't just kind of go, oh, well, there is the so-and-so, I can't really talk to them because I don't know them. So I think those are the important ones for me from a lessons learned standpoint.
And can you just clarify skip level meetings for those who don't know what that means?
Okay, so you have your direct reports who then have teams that report into those direct reports. So I make a point of having discussions not only with those leaders, but also setting up time with the people or the team members that fall within those elements. Does that help?
Yeah, and it's about being accessible as well, right, to the other people, other people within your organization that you lead. Thank you so much, Nilu. Really interesting points as well. And Andrea, what about you from a lessons learned perspective?
Yeah, for me, communication, I think, is the importance of communication is the most important lessons, I think. Being, having all those communication channels established, not leaving anybody in the dark, basically translating any business decision that comes from upstairs somewhere so that people understand what it means for them. We discussed it a little bit earlier. I really learned how important that is. You assume that because they have listened to, the CEO making a speech, that they get the same message as you do, but in the end, you need to translate that for them. That is really something that I understood that it's really important, because that translation is not always obvious. You have a lot more background in your position that they have, and then you need to shed this light on that. And what Nilu was saying, I think I totally agree. For me, it's also important to mix with the people. I don't believe in the one sitting in his own office, closed door and sending out emails. That for me, that doesn't work. And I'm also a person that, for me, being in the operations to some extent is important. So that goes quite well with mixing up with the people. So you sit down with them, you work actually with them, you gain their trust in that way. And I think that's, for me, it's part of the mix. It's very important as well.
So the themes of like communication, being accessible, and understanding your impact come through really strongly listening to all of your answers. So that's been super interesting. I'm going to go to the next question, and this is one about difficult conversations. So get ready, strap in, because it's a tough one. So managing internal conflict between two members of your team. How do you handle that? So when you have two people in your team that have a conflict, how do you handle it? Do you take positions? I guess, do you take a side or not? So Serge, let's get to you first.
So it's always tricky to take position, like a strong position at least. You can, and it's always difficult to communicate that. So for me, when there are two team members, I guess I try to get first individual meetings with those persons to understand their perspective on the situation, because there is not one story or one way to describe a situation. So it's quite important for me to get my head around, like, where are they coming from? What's the background behind the situation that they're experiencing? And like, what are their issues with the other person? Then it's always a question of, with those individuals, what could or what should they pay attention to in their behavior that can trigger the situation. So and that goes with everyone. You can always adjust your behavior and make sure that you improve and that you learn from the feedback that you get from the other. So usually when there is conflict, it means that either the communication was not appropriate or the timing was not appropriate. Something went wrong somewhere. It's also to remind the people, why are we here? And usually it's to work for a company. So it's what are we supposed to do, what's good for the company, and we all have that goal normally in our minds. So it's to remind them that they have a shared goal. The way that to achieve that may be different, but ultimately they want to do what's good for the company. And ultimately it could end up by having a discussion all together and to help them give the feedback, because sometimes people are not, they can share with their manager something, but are uncomfortable sharing with the person where they have an issue with directly. So it's to like tailor that discussion and help them restart the communication. Usually this is where you get conflict, is where communication stops. So conflict starts when communication stops. So the question is, how do you get back in, and how do you understand perspective, make sure that people, their behavior understand what in their behavior triggers that situation, and how do you restore communication progressively. Sometimes you have, as a leader, to be in for a while, and then to let them go together along and try to work further and further together. So it's a challenging situation that I've experienced a few times, but this is how I've handled it in the past.
I really like the quote of you're full of them today, Serge. I have to say, you've got all these quotes that we're going to be writing down and pushing out for sure on LinkedIn. But conflict starts when communication stops is a brilliant one. So thanks for that insight. Nilu, Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
First of all, I wrote down that quote.
I'm going to put a copyright on it.
You should have. Too late. I think the only add is it's not again, so many different scenarios can affect that discussion. So is it an email that was misread, or is it a personal conflict that happened? Is one person coming to you about the other one? So I think it's just a very multifactorial, but I think for me, the only add would be that if one person comes to me and says, hey, here's a situation, I think it also depends on how they present the situation. If they come in and just got to say, well, Fred was doing X, Y, and Z, and it's terrible, and I hate it, that says a lot about the person who's making that communication to me, right? Because then I may, view it a little bit differently. But if it's a conversation about, hey, I'm coming across an issue with one of my colleagues, and I just want to know if there's a different way I can address it. Do you have any tools? If it's that, then I may take the approach of saying, well, maybe you should try X, Y, and Z. And if that doesn't work, let's have a follow-up conversation. Because sometimes it's just kind of, reframing something or providing a different context that might help that one person be able to, reframe their discussion with the person they're having a conflict with. But at the end of the day, if something isn't resolved, I think it is a conversation with both people to be able to have that transparently, because I think that's really important, to be able to have that transparent discussion, so each one hears what the other one has to say, and then whatever feedback that I may have to help them move past it is something that they both need to hear at the same time.
Thank you for that. Guys, we've got so many questions that I'm gonna move us on to the next one, because they're good questions in here, and I want to address as many of them as we can. So the next question: how to manage a team in a difficult environment? So for example, financial difficulties, or a policy where there's no incentives, for example, there's no bonus, there's no financial leverage, or the decisions are moving. How do you keep a team motivated in those types of situations? Andrea, I'm going to throw that to you.
Yeah, that's difficult. I would say that's difficult. In general, I think, yeah, you have different probably ingredients there. One thing is doing the filtering that Serge was mentioning before. There are things that are good to communicate and give clarity. That's good, but not muddy the water and add information that is in the end just being confusing for people, and that things that are not sure yet and all of that. So I think try to keep clarity without adding too much confusion. That's for sure one thing. Lack of perspective and promotions possibilities. I think we have a number of other tools in our hands. It's not, promotion is not the only motivators that you can have. You can mix in other things. You can offer trainings. You can offer nice projects. You can offer possibility to grow and gain experience in other things. Now, if we know that the company is doing very bad and is going to, I don't know, restructure and fire most of the people, then, well, that's a different kind of situation where you can be in. That probably would require that you also get probably help from HR in terms of what you need to communicate and how these people are going to be supported or not supported. I think, yeah, depending on the extent of the difficulty, you may not be able to manage that alone, and you will need to also involve other functions in this discussion.
Does anyone have anything to add to that? Any other tips, or shall we move on?
Move on. I think you covered it really well.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was a really good answer. Next question: are there differences between cultures and counters in regards to motivate someone at work? I'm not quite sure what counters means in this context, but hopefully one of you will understand. But if not, if nobody understands what we mean by counters here, then let's just talk about, are there any differences between different cultures? Because we're all managing international teams. Oh, countries probably means countries. Are there differences between cultures and countries in regards to motivating someone at work? Serge, let's start with you.
Definitely.
Okay.
I will. That's the short answer. The longer one is you have to, there is different cultural differences, and you cannot speak with the different region of the world the same way. They are not appreciating the situation the same way. And I've been working worldwide with US, with Japan, with China. Everyone has a cultural difference, and it comes to the country most of the time, especially in Europe. You have very different cultures, and it's tied to the country. So you have very different people in the Netherlands than you have in France, than you have in Spain. So it's something that you have to acknowledge and that you have to understand also and spend some time with, because the drivers are definitely not the same. And to motivate someone, you have to understand what's the motivation in the country, on how do people react in general. So it gives you like a roadmap. Obviously, everyone is different, so you cannot say just because that person is from, I don't know, France, it's the way to do it. Definitely not. However, the way to communicate things, or how they're going to react to situations, or how they're going to want to be included in the situation, may very strongly be impacted by where they are from or where they are located. Something also to consider is origin versus where the person is located. So when you have people like from coming from one country and that are now working in a different country, it takes time to adjust and to adapt. And the motivation is also something that in those cases, you have to balance what they're going to acquire being in the new country and what they have something part of their original culture. So definitely for me, yes, it's something to acknowledge, and that needs to be paying attention to.
I'm going to press you for a little bit more detail though, Serge. So can you tell me, like you said, okay, France, different to the Netherlands, different to Germany or Switzerland. So what high level, because these are generalizations, and as you said, individuals are really different, but what are some of the like the larger contexts or generalizations that we can make for those people that are listening in that are, just embarking on leading an international team?
So I'm going to start with France because I'm French, so I feel more comfortable speaking about that. And I'm not going to be, no one's going to be able to blame me for that. We are seen, French folks are usually seen as kind of pessimistic or focused on problems rather than solutions, or not enthusiastic enough, for instance, especially if you talk to people from the US, where things are going to be largely more optimistic and positive and things like that. So this is a concrete example. You cannot give the same message to someone located in France or in the US, just because it's going to be perceived and received differently. People, Dutch people from Netherlands, for instance, are very direct folks. So you can be direct with them in general. That's not true with everyone, but you can expect that type of direct interaction with them. It's not being rude. It's just the way that they communicate. So it's those are examples that I can give you on top of my head.
Andrea, maybe you can talk a little bit about the Swiss.
Yeah, can I talk about the Swiss? Well, I'm also Italian, so I can talk about the Italians as well. So I think indeed the difference, I did work when I was a Medtronic, I worked quite a lot with the Netherlands, and indeed there you can send a message that is 2 lines and is not seen as rude, and it's fine. You send the same message to Italy, they think you are completely rude and pissed off, and what is the problem there? So yeah, for me now, interesting in the company where I am, we are going through a transition. We are growing. We are hiring a lot of people that are from other cultures. as well. The company not so long ago used to be a company that was really only based in the region around Bern. So then it starts to, okay, now you have people that actually speak a different dialect, or they don't speak German, they speak a different language, like I speak French, for example. All right. So, and then now you have people that are coming from other places in Europe, outside of Europe, Indians, whatever. And that adjustment is not just coming by itself. It needs a specific effort to make sure that there's different cultures and different way of understanding the same thing are understood and they don't lead into conflict that we were talking before. It is, at least for me, it's a constant effort in making sure that things are understood correctly by everybody, and in particular in this interpersonal communication within the teams. It can easily lead to misunderstanding that can escalate up to something that is not worth it. It's just a different way of expressing maybe the same thing. So yeah, it is something that is, for me now, in particular today, something that is very present, these intercultural differences and how to manage that and making sure that it's not coming too much into your way, but finding a solution around that can be a difficult topic. Yeah,
I think it's so interesting because actually a lot of miscommunications can happen just simply because of these intercultural differences if you're not fully aware of them. But also, so it's like important to be mindful of that in the teams that you're managing, but also in yourself, because then you're also going to have your own inherent biases based on where you're from. And understanding that, okay, actually, I do have this tendency to communicate this way, and actually that's, I'm not being rude, I just like to send one-line emails, for example, and actually communicate that outwards to your team as well can be really powerful in making sure that you're building that trust and connection. Let's move on. I've got one more question, Nilu. This one's going to be for you, which is around, how do you manage a team when the N+1 directly gives instructions to some members of your team without informing you?
Love that. So does everybody know what an N+1 is?
Let's explain it anyway.
Right. So I'll personalize it. So my boss will send one of my associates a direct instruction on working on, just work on this quick little project for me and not tell me about it. So there's the pitfall of that is that my associate is, when I say, my direct report, my associate is now thinking, oh my goodness, I've got this project that's been given to me by my boss's boss, so I need to focus on this and get it just right. So now they have additional pressure. I have no idea because I have already prioritized the work as well as, all based on goals and objectives for that person. So now, in order for them to do this activity, they are not doing something else. Okay, so essentially, and I've had to do this multiple times, unfortunately, is I actually have the conversation with my leader to say, hey, I know you gave X person this activity. We'll get it done, or actually it's going to be delayed because this person is fully loaded. If next time you just go through me, what that does is it allows me to assign the appropriate person to manage this as well as manage what they're doing. So again, it becomes less about the person, less about the fact that, hey, you didn't tell me. That's not the issue. The issue for me is I need to make sure that my team is set up for success. And the way I do that is by prioritizing their activities and ensuring that they're, they have enough bandwidth to get whatever they're needed to do to get done.
I really like how you frame it and you talk about the benefit of why it's important that your boss comes to you about it instead of just going to somebody in the team, and you frame it as like, okay, if you do this, then this is how it's going to actually help you and work out better for you, Mr. Whoever, so that you're talking about the benefit to your boss. Really smart, really good angle. Right, one more question, guys, and then that's it. So the last question we've got: what mechanisms do you have in place to ensure that communication is clear, consistent, and constructive within your team? Serge?
So usually what I like to do is doing regularly meetings, Teams meeting, even if they are short, even if they are sometimes canceled because sometimes there is no update to provide. But I like to have those meetings with people on camera, being focused, and make sure that they hear and they can react all at the same time on the information provided, because I think it's very important. And usually when someone misunderstands something, someone else did misunderstand that as well, or maybe you did not communicate that properly. So when you have groups, at least everyone hears the same things from start, and they can ask you questions and you can refine what you said, because sometimes it's very clear, crystal clear for you, and maybe the way you say it or the way that it was received is completely different. The other way is also to give everyone space to speak and to express themselves. That's why usually those meetings are very helpful with, to make sure that they can share and express and ask questions that, again, most of them usually have, but indeed there is just one person who is brave enough to ask the question. So it's very important to share that. And also to not being afraid to say, this is what I know for today. And it may not be clear enough, it may not be perfect, it may not be, but this is the information that I have, and I'm going to share them with you. It's not that you're trying to hide something. It's not that you're trying to protect them from something. Sometimes you need to give an information that's not already well fine-tuned with all the information that they can, then the team can ask you for. And it's good to recognize that, and sometimes to start with the conversation with that information.
And showing a little bit that vulnerability that you don't always have the answers as well. So that has been an amazing session, filled and packed full of amazing quotes, nuggets, and lots of learnings based on all of your years of experience in leadership. Thank you for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge and your experience for all of our listeners. We've had over 150 people listening live on this session today, and I know we've got a lot of people that are going to be listening to this on demand as well. So it's been absolutely fantastic. In the last couple of minutes, I'm going to jump now to our audience, and I'm going to ask you all to have a look at your Slido. There is a poll that is coming out. One question: what has been your biggest learning of today's session? Please let us know. Let us know what is the thing that for you has been a light bulb moment that you're taking away from this session. I'm going to be reading them out to share them as well with our panelists, because I'm sure they definitely want to know what you're taking away from this. So please take a second to just add what you've learned, and let's see it come up on the Slido. I'm going to add my learning, which I'm going to add that quote that I really liked, which was, conflict starts when communication stops. Let's have a look. So what have we got? Keeping clear and open communication. Transparency is super important. We've got people typing and adding their response. Keep clear, open communication has come up again. What else have we got? Listening is really important. That's come up. People are still typing their responses. What else have we got? What have been your learnings, guys? Type them in. Trust is really important. So all of these themes that we've spoken about have come through. Transparency. So these are really, so guys, your messages have come through to our audience, which is super important, and really glad that those have hit home. Next poll that we have for you all on Slido, I'm really interested to know, will you be attending our next session? Yes or no? You're going to be seeing a new poll launching in your Slido. I'm interested to know if you intend on joining our next session. I want to know if you want us to keep doing these sessions and if they're useful for you, and if you've got things that you're taking home with this. So please take a second to let us know if you're going to be joining our next session. So far on my screen, I can see lots of yeses. So yes, yeah, all different versions of yeses. So that's really positive. And I'm really excited to announce that we will be doing another session really soon. But before we do that, I just want to quickly talk about Elemed, because for those of you who don't know what we do, we have 3 pillars. You might know us from the podcast, or from Future Leaders, or just from recruitment, or from my LinkedIn posts. But actually, we do total talent management. And in total talent management, there are 3 pillars associated with that. Permanent hiring. We also can help with compliance projects on both an interim and a statement of work perspective. And also the third pillar is skills development, and future leaders obviously falls into skills development. And within that, we also have not only just regulatory and quality and clinical, but we have deeper specialisms. We have access to people that have expertise in data science, in AI, in cybersecurity. Sustainability is a big topic right now, companion diagnostics. So these are just some of the areas. So if this is something that interests you, please reach out to us, message me on LinkedIn, email hello@Elemed. I've done my mini Elemed pitch now as well. Aside from that, we also offer loads and loads of value to the community. So if you're not already engaged with some of these things, please check them out. We have the MDR IVDR group, which is a network of over 10,000 people talking about and asking questions to each other on these regulations. We've got Career Diaries by Elemed, the executive podcast, worth subscribing to and listening out for. There's a new episode coming very, very soon. And of course, we also have, in partnership with RAPS, a mentoring program, which is the Elemed Mentoring Academy. So think about if there are people on your team that you want to progress, perhaps that might be something that you want to consider them for. So the next session coming very, very soon in May is going to be all around driving innovation. So super excited for that session. We're just recruiting the final speakers, and then we're going to be announcing the date. So keep an eye on your follow-up emails, keep an eye on our LinkedIn page, keep an eye on my profile, and a big, big thank you to our speakers and to everybody for listening. This has been a fantastic session, and we are at the top of the hour. I promised we'd finish on time, so we're out. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.